This is Flashback, a 1992 science fiction action-adventure, originally developed by Delphine Software and published by US Gold. Originally appearing on the Amiga, it has also been seen on a plethora of home machines, from the Mega Drive to the SNES, the Atari Jaguar and the Sega Dreamcast, and even the Acorn Archimedes. It's easy to see why this game made such an impression on release. Even though we'd seen lifelike rotoscoped animation before in Impossible Mission, Prince of Persia, and Delphine's own Another World, Flashback was by far and away more visually striking than ever seen before, with unprecedented fluidity of character animation and an exciting science fiction setting to complement the realistic platforming. The year is 2142, and somewhere far out into the galaxy, Conrad B. Hart escapes the captivity of a mysterious alien ship, and after a daring high-speed chase, crashes on a dense jungle planet. Coming to, he realizes that he has no memory of who he is or what he's doing there, but he retrieves a holographic message from himself, instructing him to find an old friend in a subterranean world. Once there, Conrad finds Ian, a trusted ally who restores his memory, which reveals that Conrad unwittingly discovered that shape-shifting aliens, known as Morphs, have been infiltrating the highest echelons of human society with a goal of world domination. Conrad decides that it's up to him alone to make his way back to Earth and find a way to stop the invaders. But his only way off the planet is by entering a dangerous TV game show called Death Tower, where the prize is a one-way ticket to Earth. After taking on a bunch of freelance work to pay his way onto the show, Conrad competes in and ultimately defeats the Death Tower and earns his passage home. Unfortunately, it isn't long before he finds himself once again in the clutches of the enemy when he is discovered spying on them. After another daring escape, Conrad's only choice is to teleport directly into the home world of the Morphs in an uncharted part of the galaxy and strike at the heart of the invaders to put a stop to them once and for all. After fighting his way into the master brain and promptly dropping a nuke on it, Conrad escapes the exploding Morph planet in a shuttle. The game ends with a victorious Conrad stranded far across the galaxy with no way home, entering suspended animation in the hopes that someone might find him someday. Flashback is one of the most successful games of all time, and set the bar for the genre of the game that is today known as the cinematic platformer, influencing the likes of the Oddworld games and the creepily atmospheric Limbo, to name a few. It most recently saw a Nintendo Switch reissue for its 20th anniversary, bringing the game to a whole new generation of gamers. So, in celebration of this epic and awe-inspiring game, here are 10 fantastic Flashback facts. Despite coming out for the Amiga first in 1992, Flashback was originally created for the Mega Drive, or the Genesis if you wish, and all other versions are in fact ports and not, as is often mistakenly assumed, an Amiga original. It's an easy mistake to make given that the Mega Drive game was delayed out of production and arrived a full year after the Amiga version, with all other console ports following later. But speaking in issue 118 of Retro Gamer, the game's director, Paul Cuisset himself, dispelled decades of delusional declarations that Delphine Software's iconic game was an Amiga original.
The best version for me is the Mega Drive version. The game was created for this platform. It was a port on the Amiga. The main platform was the Mega Drive.
So, sorry Amiga fans, that's one claim to fame I'm afraid you can't have. But at least you still have Babylon 5, I guess. The The Godfather is a 1969 novel written by Mario Puzo and tells the story of a fictional mafia family in post-war New York City, but it is probably best remembered as a trilogy of movie adaptations starring Marlon Brando and Al Pacino. In the early 90s, British-based publishing powerhouse US Gold acquired the license for the Godfather saga and promptly approached Delphine Software to adapt it into a game in their trademark cinematic style. For some reason, Delphine decided that the best direction to take a tale about gangsters in post-war America was to set it in the far future and in outer space to boot. Delphine pitched this idea to US Gold, who, to their credit, didn't balk at the idea per se, but instead decided to go ahead with a space-age mystery adventure and dropped the Godfather license from the game entirely. US Gold instead partnered with Creative Materials for The Godfather the action game in 1991, a side-scrolling shooter that followed the events of the film trilogy. It was created for the Amiga, Atari ST and DOS, and as you can see, it might look cool, but actually it's a bit shite. As an aside, The Godfather was adapted in 2006 for the PC, PlayStation and Xbox consoles at the time to generally favourable reviews, but not from the film trilogy's director, Francis Ford Coppola, who voiced his angry disapproval and called it a misuse of the film. One is left only to speculate what a Godfather franchise/sci-fi mashup could have been like, but as far as adaptations go, it surely couldn't have been much worse than The Godfather Part 3, right? While the European versions of the game left players with little more than a manual and a pre-game introductory movie setting the scene, though the Amiga version came with a comprehensive manual chock full of world-building paraphernalia, and allowed the game's numerous cutscenes to unravel the plot as the game went on, the American release came with a little something extra to better explain the backstory to transatlantic players. Cue Marvel, who produced a 14-page mini-comic that was incorporated into the manual. The brief strip shed some much-needed exposition of the plot while portraying Conrad as a chisel-jawed classic comic book hero, nothing like his actual portrayal within the game. This comic was included in all US versions of the Genesis, Sega CD and SNES games. So it seems then that Conrad Hart is among Marvel's pantheon of heroes, but I wouldn't hold my breath for a series on Disney+. Alongside the groundbreaking visuals, exciting gameplay and engaging story, much of Flashback's appeal comes from the myriad of recognisable homages and references to earlier sci-fi movies. Conrad's mission to recover his memories and discover the purpose of his mission is of course very reminiscent of Total Recall, a contemporary and well-loved film at the time. The Death Tower TV game that Conrad takes part in might evoke similarities to The Running Man, but Cuisset claims that this was not the film that inspired it, rather that it was a 1983 French Yugoslav film called The Prize of Peril, based upon a 1958 short story of the same name. While the conspiracy of aliens concealing themselves in disguises that can be revealed by special glasses, well, that's the entire plot of John Carpenter's classic They Live. Flashback may not at first glance seem like the sort of game to invite puritanical interference from Nintendo, but in the 90s they were so invested in preserving their family-friendly image that nothing was safe from censorship, however subtle, and so Sunsoft's port for the SNES contained a few changes. The bar found in New Washington was changed to a cafe, and so the barman who Conrad speaks to swiftly changed employment to a waiter. The Death Tower game show, presumably because of the word death, was changed for Cyber Tower, including all the posters throughout the levels that advertise it. The most egregious change, however, was the alteration to Conrad himself, where in this version his shirt colour was changed from white to red. The audacity of Nintendo! It's ruined! Ruined, I say! Flashback's production was nothing short of ambitious. Each level in the game was made from hand-drawn backgrounds, and character animations were all meticulously rotoscoped. But when it came to fitting it all onto a standard cartridge for the Mega Drive, Delphine Software needed to convince Sega to invest in a more expensive 24 meg cart to hold the game. Their only way to dazzle the execs at Sega was to demonstrate it running from a 24 meg cartridge, but Sega weren't prepared to supply them with one. As luck would have it, an engineer at Delphine built a 24 meg cart of their own, and their ingenuity impressed Sega enough to agree to stump up for the bigger cartridges. However, even with the extra space, the game data was still too vast, and so the team devised new compression techniques to squeeze the game onto one cartridge without compromising their vision. Needless to say, they succeeded, because Flashback stands out even today as one of the most technically impressive titles ever to grace the Mega Drive. "20 years after its debut, in response to growing fan demand, Paul Cuisset, with his new studio Vector Cell, put together a remake of the original game for release on the Xbox 360 through the Xbox Live Arcade. Many members of the original game's team were involved, along with a number of fans of the game who jumped at the chance to bring the game to a modern audience. In addition to receiving an audio-visual facelift, turning it into a 2.5D platformer, the combat system was changed to 360-degree aiming, and the difficulty was dramatically decreased. Unfortunately, the game wasn't generally well received, with some remarking that the graphics upgrade made it look too generic, while others lamented the lack of challenge from an overall lower difficulty.
If you find him, tell him I've got a package for him in New Washington.
Sure, okay. If I meet who?
Ouch! I'm out of here. Final safety tip. Don't eat the fruit.
What? Wait. Oh, great. You didn't even tell me. Awesome sauce.
Awesome sauce. Awesome sauce.
What the fuck?
It now sits at the unenviable score of 50 out of 100 on Metacritic. It just goes to show that if it ain't broken, then don't fix it. Maybe, just like Conrad Hart, Paul Cuisset would rather erase this failed remake from his own memory. Originally developed under the title of Crossfire, Fade to Black picks up after the events of Flashback, throwing Conrad right back into the clutches of the enemy after 50 years in cryosleep, and kicking off a whole new quest to save Earth from domination. But this time, instead of lushly drawn rotoscope 2D platforming gameplay, we find ourselves in a third-person viewed, Gorod shaded polygonal world populated by motion-captured characters. This 1996 sequel was developed by Delphine for MS-DOS and later on the PlayStation, just as games like Tomb Raider were setting the trend for more immersive 3D-driven game environments. The game is not without its flaws. The difficulty is pitched a little too high, even at the lower settings, compounded by a clumsy control system. But despite releasing to largely positive reviews, especially for the fully textured PlayStation port, which sold enough copies to go platinum, it now seems to be remembered, if at all, as a blocky polygonal nightmare that nobody likes. Rumours persist that Fade to Black was planned for the Sega Saturn and Nintendo 64, but that's probably a story for another time. In 2002, the planned third entry in the Flashback series, known simply as Flashback Legend, was in development for release on the Game Boy Advance. This time, the gameplay would revisit the style as seen in the original game, with the familiar rotoscoped Conrad, presumably a reused asset from the SNES game, jumping, climbing and shooting his way around a 2D platforming world. Unfortunately, Delphine Software was on the brink of bankruptcy at the time, and the game, which was nearly completed, was sadly cancelled. A ROM of the game was leaked soon after its cancellation, consisting of 16 playable, nearly finished levels and French on-screen text. A missing exit on the 9th level makes it impossible to complete, and there are several other glitches, but it offers an interesting glimpse into a game that could have made Flashback into a trilogy. A version of the ROM that has been translated into English is also available if you know where to find it. It seems then that after all this time, that elusive third Flashback game is about to become a reality. The ignominiously titled Flashback 2, currently being developed by Microids, the team who brought the original game to the Switch, is slated for a 2022 release. Not a lot is known about this game as yet, but the title rather hints that it will ignore the events of Fade to Black, once again picking up right after the conclusion of Flashback. But if it worked for movie franchises such as Halloween and Terminator, picking an earlier point to kick off with a new sequel, then why not for games as well, right? Microids do boast, however, that the game will take what made Flashback so great and build on that. So expect more running, jumping, rolling and climbing, rotoscope fashion around a lovingly created 2D landscape like it's 1992 all over again. It's all but guaranteed that Flashback 2 will arrive first on the Nintendo Switch, followed by the PC and other console versions, and personally, I can't wait. So those were 10 fantastic Flashback facts. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. As always, please like and share this video and make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time on Retro Respawn.